Hey there, cake friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Alexandria, and today we have something truly exciting in store for you. In this special two-part series, we are deep diving into the art of Lambeth cake piping, a cake decorating technique that will bring your designs to new heights. This is also a sneak peek into my membership, the Finespun Cakes Academy, which is coming to you in late July. So if this in-depth style of teaching resonates with you, I would suggest to sign up for the waitlist. You can do that in the description box below. Okay, back to the video. Whether you are a seasoned baker or a curious beginner, get ready to transform your cakes into classic masterpieces. In part one, we are going to explore all of the basics, so the techniques and the tools that you're going to need to create those stunning Lambeth designs. From marking out your cake to classic overpiping and even delicate drop strings, we will take you step by step, showing you our favorite tips and tricks along the way to ensure that your cakes look super professional and, of course, elegant. So gather your piping bags and join us for this exciting two-part series on Lambeth cake piping. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss a single tip, trick, or technique. Let's get started on this beautiful piping journey together. Let's gather all of our tools to make this Lambeth cake. So we're gonna start over here with some royal icing that I've already whipped up. So this is a full batch of my royal icing. I am gonna link this, of course, in the description box below, along with all the other tools. So this is at like a semi-stiff peak. It's holding its shape completely, not melting down, but it's not super stiff, so that it has a little bit of give when we go to pipe with it. And then I have a bunch of offset spatulas, and I'm just gonna use these if I ever need to scrape off any mistakes that I've made. A scribe tool, which is just gonna help us mark out the entire cake. And of course I have my cake here. So this is on a 10-inch whiteboard, and it is a 6-inch diameter cake, and it's also 6 inches tall. So it's just a styrofoam cake under here. You can do this, of course, with a real cake too. And I've covered it in a layer of light blue, kind of that Wedgwood blue fondant. And I've used these three colors in order to color the fondant, which are royal blue, deep purple, and grape violet. For piping, I have a variety of piping tips, and I am going to link these in the description box below, but just know that you can use kind of anything you have that's a general shape and size. You don't have to buy these exact ones if you don't want to. I've got a coupler and a reusable piping bag. I also will grab an elastic for this to close up the back of it. And then the final thing that you're going to need is all of your measuring and marking tools. So I have a couple different measuring implements, just a ruler and a measuring tape. So this is to measure more around the cake, and this is to measure the height of the cake. And then I have a piece of paper, a pencil, and a pair of scissors. So I think that is everything you're going to need in order to make your Lambeth style cake. We're gonna start with marking out the entire cake first so that you have a really good idea of where everything's gonna go before you put even your first mark of royal icing on it. And then we can get to piping from the top to the bottom. So let's get started. We will start by measuring out this cake. So I have my ruler, I have my measuring tape, and I have already measured around this cake, and it is 20.5 inches in circumference. So I've divided that by 8, which is about 2.5, and I've cut out a piece of paper with the width of 2.5, and the depth doesn't matter at this point. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball that on the cake and decide how deep I want the swags to go. So the initial ones, I'm gonna leave about 1 centimeter of room at the top, and then I like a gentle type swag, so maybe around here. So we're gonna want it to come down like this, and then back up like that. And this is just like a general template. It doesn't need to be perfect. So once I've marked out the shape and size of the swag that I want, I'm just gonna fold this in half and cut it so it's nice and symmetrical. Then let's test it out to make sure we're happy with the shape. And yeah, I think that'll look nice. Let's mark about 1 centimeter down so we can get that first marking in. Then we just use our template and we try and make sure that that's parallel to the top, and we mark our next spot, and we just continue all the way around. Trying to keep it parallel every single time. Perfect. Now we can begin to mark the actual swag. So it doesn't have to be a perfect line all the way across. This is just a general guideline and just something for you to generally follow as you're making your first piping lines. So I just want to trace around it. Sorry if you can't see this, but anyway, trace around the entire thing generally, just so you have a marking and you know where you're going with your piping bag. Yeah, the top border is like fairly straightforward, mostly just swags. So this is all the marking you will need for it. And if you feel comfortable just doing this free-handed, you can go for it. This is just if you need a little bit more guidance, it will make your life a little easier. All right, so I will finish marking that out, but next, let's move on to our middle section. So I'm going to kind of think of where these swags are gonna be. So we're gonna be over piping here. So we'll do a thick layer, and then we're going to do a couple drop swag or drop strings in between. So that might go down to around here or so for those two. And then we want our middle border somewhere in the middle of these two lines. So let's say on the ruler it's 7.5. I'll just mark that and then just do some lines all the way around at that 7.5 mark. You don't really need to do like a straight line, like actually mark it all the way, but if that helps you, you can do that just like this, holding it steady and just dragging your scribe tool all the way across to mark that line. And the final thing we want to mark is our base. So these are just going to be some shells going upwards, and we want to leave some room beneath them so that we can do another little border underneath. So I'm just going to like do a kind of general marking here so I can get an idea of what that will look like. And then a shell here, and probably up to this height and this depth. So about 1/2 centimeter on this ruler, and then at 3 centimeters. So I'll just make a couple marks very gently in the fondant, just so I can make sure that it looks fairly consistent going all the way. And once we have finished all of those markings, get your royal icing re-whipped, and we can get started on the cake. Now we get to the exciting part, piping. So I have my PME 44 tip, and we're going to start with just a little bit of a rope, just following all of our scallop borders here. So we want to start out a little bit thinner at both of the sides and then have it a little bit wider in the middle. So all you have to do is alter the size of kind of circle that you're making as you make the rope. So I'll show you now. Just touch down, and then you want to make small circles and then slightly larger ones, adding more pressure, and then releasing slightly as you get to the end. So just try and make it as symmetrical as possible, and just keep even pressure all the way along. No need to rush. And don't forget to breathe. I often do forget to breathe. So small circles, larger, and then smaller. And then if you have any little spots you don't like, just take your scribe tool and clean it up. That is one of the great things about royal icing. It's much easier to clean up than buttercream is. I'm just trying to keep it clean as I go. It's much easier to kind of clean it as you go, or like every single line you make all the way around the cake, than try and go back later. All right, so our first border is all finished. Take a look around, make sure you're happy with all of your little intersection points, and just clean them up if you need to. Sometimes if you wait like 30 seconds or a minute to clean them up, that's actually a great time to do it because it's not gonna be quite as sticky. So do that every time you finish another border. All right, so next step is going to be to start our overpiping. So I've got my PME number 5 here, which is just a small star tip. So use any small star tip that you have. And now we're just gonna go over all of these lines with just a rough kind of scallop using the star tip. So we're not doing this rope border again, we're just going with a plain star tip all the way across, and this just helps make a base for all of our overpiping. So just follow the line as best you can from the top. And we're kind of not letting the star shape come out completely. We're almost scraping on the rope border. So this is like a pretty thin line of royal icing. Then we'll go back and clean everything after. I am steadying my elbows both on the table, and I'm steadying the bag with my opposite hand. So that's gonna help me prevent any shaking, or too much shaking at least. And then beyond that, it's really just practice. Let's switch over to our PME number 3, or your largest round tip that you're going to be using. And if your icing is getting bubbly at all, if it's getting any breakage, just re-whip it and it should be fine. All right, so my PME number 3, we're gonna start over piping with this. So I'm going to start right at the top, just where the top of these intersections are happening, and then I'm going to lift off, and I'm not touching down. I'm creating a drop string all the way across, so I'm just allowing it to land on that plain star tip that we had. And then I am touching down at the opposite side. And then after that, we can always move this a little bit around, or we might wait just a second to do that. So it's just sitting directly on top of where that star tip went. So if you need to, just practice your drop strings on a cake pan or on your table or wherever. It just takes a little bit of practice to get that really nice even swag shape. And also having the right consistency of royal icing is another important thing. We are now switching to our PME 2.5. If your royal icing does start to get soft and it feels too heavy, just allow it to dry for a couple of minutes, and then you should be able to start again on the next size. So we'll just start exactly the same way, doing that nice drop string swag right on top of the previous one. So when you get the hang of this, you'll get to go a little bit faster, and also when you find like the right kind of level for your elbows and all of that to be at, you'll definitely feel more comfortable piping. I would recommend a chair that you can switch the heights of, because you are going to want to change your height depending on the border you're doing. If you ever have like a border that's just a little bit off in kind of the way that it lay down on the previous piped line, you can kind of, once it's like semi-dry, you can kind of like reshape it a little bit with your finger. Obviously clean hands, please. But that is another great thing about working with royal icing. It is a lot more forgiving than buttercream, and you can always remove stuff and redo it if you need to. All right, let's switch to PME number 2. As these tips get smaller, you may find that you need to re-whip your icing if you get any air bubbles. It is important to continually do that, maybe every 20 to 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're gonna get a lot of breakage and it'll just be more annoying than anything. So let's just continue on. Okay, I think I am good with this for now. I don't think I'll go to the PME 1.5 just because my icing is starting to get a bit bubbly, and we've already got quite a nice width on this. But if you really want to go old school, then definitely add a few more layers. The next thing I'm going to do is mark off the center of all of these swags, and I'm just going to do kind of like a little scallop border going all the way around. This is something I learned from Wendy Cromer's class. I really love this style and this look, so let's use this technique and just make a little marking about 1 centimeter down in the middle of all of our swags. This is going to kind of make a V shape going up, so I'll just mark that out. And then it'll come up across and then back down. So let's mark out all the V shapes, and then we just have to attach each of the sides to one another. So I've made all just like little V shapes here. I guess you could use a template for this, but I always just eyeball it. And now let's just attach this with this one. We'll stick with PME 2 for this. And all you do is make tiny little scallops following your line. And then I'll stand up to do this part. Just trying to keep even pressure all the way across. I'm gonna do all the top first and then go back and do the bottoms. I like to bring these scallops to a nice point at the bottom. And if you want this to even look more delicate, just use a smaller tip. Or if you are piping on a bigger cake, you could always use a larger tip. All right, we are all done with that border. I will probably wait till the end to do any kind of finishing touches on everything, like finishing dots and all of that, just to make sure it all looks cohesive together. All right, so we re-whipped the icing, took a snack break, and we're back in action. So I've got my PME 3 tip, and we're going to do a drop string right underneath the current kind of swag that we have going on. So I am going to eyeball this. However, of course, you can always mark it if you want. I'm just going to go right between the intersection there, come all the way down, and then make my way to the other side, and then touch down and lift off. And just repeat that, going all the way around, trying to make them all about the same distance downwards. So we just want to try and keep them all in line as best we can. Some people like to count while they do this to make sure their strings are the same length. However, I've never really gotten into that. All right, so here's a good chance for me to show you how to fix something. So our drop string did not attach properly. So all we need to do is either wait for a minute, and this will come off quite easily. If not, I'm going to go right in here and just remove that. And it should come off kind of all in one piece. And then we can just clean that up. So we are all done with that. Let's move on to our PME 2.5 for another drop string. This one is gonna go just underneath where our current one is. And then we may do one on top of the current drop string, the number 3. We'll just see how it all goes. So start again right at that intersection and come down. So now we've got one, and we just want to try and imitate that all the way around. And your hands should not really hurt that much when you're doing this if your icing is whipped correctly. If you find that your icing is too stiff and it's not really sticking well to your fondant, just add a little bit of extra egg white or even a little drop of water to soften it up just the slightest bit. Let's do another over piping on the 3 as I mentioned. So just pipe on top exactly the same as before. Just try and line those up as best you can. Okay, so that one is finished. Let's do a little bit of a detailing up here while we're waiting on these to dry a little bit, and then we're gonna do just a bit more detail here. I'm gonna switch to PME 2. And we're just gonna do a very tiny detail at the top. So I'm gonna make a little loop going up and then just 2 little loops on the side. It's just a little detail that I like to add to the tips of swag sometimes. I think this one is easiest standing up. So a little loop like that, and then one on either side. Sorry, you probably won't be able to see this. So it almost looks like a little bit of a knot or a bow or something like that. And then you can put one dot right at the intersection. And when I'm making my dots, I try and come off in a little half circle, prevents it from getting pointy. But if it does, just wait for it to dry for 30 seconds and then you can usually just pat it down with your finger, or if it's kind of sticky still, you can use a damp finger. Great, so we're all done the top there. Now let's do a little drop string in between each of our swags. I'm gonna mark this quickly. I don't think this is something we could have marked beforehand because you can never really foresee how things are gonna kind of play out when you're actually making the cake. So I'm just going to make sure this is as centered as possible. And then I can go ahead and mark. So I'm just gonna do a little drop string, maybe 2.5 centimeters down or so. So I just make a mark and then I just rotate, trying not to move where my hand is. So I can keep it at the same spot, going all the way around. And again, sometimes I just eyeball this when I'm actually piping it. All right, so we're gonna start at the top. We're gonna make a little loop around and then come right back up. So pressure and just let it fall almost like a drop string. And loop around and come back up. Okay, so I think that's everything we're gonna do today. In the next video, I'm gonna show you how to do our middle border and also how to finish up all of the entire bottom border, which is gonna be kind of like upside down shells, and then we're gonna do some really nice drop string work between those. It's gonna really bring the look together, so I'm very excited to show you that. Thank you so much for watching. Part 2 will be out in 1 week, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out as soon as it is. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I know you're going to love the Finespun Cakes Academy, so don't forget to join the waitlist in the description box below, and I will see you in a week.